So, so the topic today is my giving out any pointers or whatever about how to recruit speakers going forward. And I want to caution, my way is not necessarily the way that we're going to do it. Because I tend to be rather intensive about researching the speaker and I put recruiting a speaker as the highest, most important task within ADG is in my years of leadership. So so again, and Mary, for example, we're doing it a little bit differently. At least for at the first, there's a lot of resources she got into that have not been depleted yet. But a year from now, they will be probably. So anyway, so I will give you my insights, and again, it's not necessarily the way that it's going to be done. Perfect.
So we have a committee of 5 people, maybe 6. Because it takes 5 or 6 people to try to fill Jim's shoes. And we're inspired by some of the things Jim has done. We have a few new ideas as well. You'll notice the second part of this thing lists future topics, a lot of great ideas there. There are some suggested dates, but we have been working and the dates are a little different. But the one thing we can say for certain is that July 10th, we'll have Rick Kastner talking about Peru. So be sure to show up. We will not be having it on the 3rd because that's the 3rd of July, because that's 4th of July weekend. But anyway, we're looking forward to learning more. Thank you.
Okay, and jump in, and I wish Mary were here because
Mary's kind of coordinating.
Yeah. All right, so so let me just talk through here and give some background of why we did this and why we didn't do that or whatever. The first 2 Sundays, one being a holiday in January, we did not have ADG. Then Duffy Bonhoeffer shows up twice. I had some. Let me explain. Duffy Bonhoeffer was from an elite family. Mary's here, okay. Elite family in Germany that had been at the top of high society for many years. Duffy Bonhoeffer was the first of his family to go into ministry, and he was highly educated. He graduated at age 24, and he cannot become a minister until 25. So he had a year to go. It was recommended that he come to America and to give him some exposure to different cultures or whatever. He came to Black Harlem, New York, and he was unimpressed at the beginning with Christianity in America. But he was blown away by the music in Harlem, the spiritual music, the Black music. And he began to realize that the Blacks were the so-called underclass, and he was able to have more of a relationship in his eyes, like Jesus had with his people. That Jesus dealt with helping a lot of not the elite, but the people in the middle class and middle class. And that's exactly the situation that Duffy Bonhoeffer and a aristocrat, I might call him, that's probably too strong, but that he developed with the Blacks of Harlem, exposing them to a lot of things, and meanwhile he got exposed again to the music and to an underclass, and he began to think, well, I'm not sure this is true, but he could see that he was in a situation much like Jesus was 2,000 years prior. Um, uh, After a couple of years, he went back to Germany. At that point, the Nazis had taken control. And so it was a very different Germany that he returned to. And he spent most of his career there in Germany fighting against the Nazis, which took a lot of chutzpah, I guess you could say. But had he been not in the upper class, he probably would not have been able to do that. And finally, as the Americans and the Russians were closing in on Berlin, the Nazis killed him. Anyway, so there's a very strong, powerful story there. I had a recording about the first part, Bonhoeffer in Harlem, and that really affected, that was a part of his training. We really learned a lot about him, changed a lot as a result of that early experience dealing with this, I'll call it underclass, people who knew less well off than he. And it affected his ministry going forward. Meanwhile, I talked to Reverend Bob about Bonhoeffer, and he said he had a recording dealing with part of the Nazis. So we did a two-part series, two-part bit where I did the early years, the first 2 years of his ministry, if you will, but in Harlem, in a very different society than he, and a less privileged society, and then Reverend Bob did the latter part about his death at the hands of the Nazis. And it was a very difficult position to be in, but he had the guts to go back. He did not stay in New York. He went back knowing that Hitler was already in control. So I'm giving you a long story about that, but some of the things I did were like that, things that I had knowledge of and I knew were challenging and would be informative. And this is a good example, a fortunate example. So let me go on. I spent too much time on that. Frank Hansel who raised in Rochester, New York, knew of a minister, Myra Brown, who was head of a Catholic, defined as not a regular Catholic, but a independent Catholic.
Roman Catholic.
And it had a number of Black members, but it was not majority Black, as I understand it. Anyway, so she dealt with a lot of social justice issues, and Frank was able to get her to talk remotely from Rochester. Very impressive presentation. That really she should have been talking to the social action board, because their roles their pitch were quite similar. But she just had a lot of practical experience and could give examples. Moving on, knowing that Rick had moved away had gotten divorced and moved out of town, and he thought Idlewild was just great. I know Rick well enough that he will present on any topic that he loves. So I said, would you talk about Idlewild, which I call it heaven on, which I labeled as heaven on earth. And he did an excellent job. Then we had stained glass, done by Dale Townsend, based upon the connection being the stained glass he did here at our church. And these are all things that, well, were very, very much on my mind and that I could easily get access to. Then we had a recording of Bishop John Shelby Spong, Episcopalian bishop on the liberal side, talking about the sins of the scripture, portions of the scripture that he thinks should not have been in the scripture. Yeah, so he explained why. And I thought that was very informative. I have, for years, I've been trying to get people to talk, knowledgeable people to talk about the Trinity. Now, why Christians believe, why Trinity is so important to Christians and much less important to other religions, including other forms of Christianity. Jump in here if you have questions. I'm again, these are my things that were on my mind and why they resulted in there being an ADD discussion on that topic.
Jim, can you explain the category column?
For the annual report, I put things in categories, 5 groupings. C and J is Christianity and Judaism. RES is, the S is social justice. I don't have the annual report here.
Religious education or race equality?
Does anybody have an annual report?
Well, let's see. Not on.
The two that are in that category, the ones that are in that category are that one, Mouse, and Russia's.
Well, Z,
So that's probably based.
this is miscellaneous, Z miscellaneous. The Z is there to put it at the bottom alphabetically. So it's miscellaneous. Let's see, what else besides,
That's it.
okay, all right. Again, the RES, the S is social justice. And the R and the S are related. So we got to Trinity, I believe. Well, Reverend BJ was very willing to talk about Trinity, and he really, I think when he studied for his in seminary, I think he focused on that because he was quite knowledgeable. Then we had something else planned for March 6th, but March 6th, but then Russia invaded Ukraine. So even though we already had an announcement in the preview on the topic, we dropped what we were doing and I got some really good analysis of the start of this Russian invasion and the Russian invasion back in 2014 of Ukraine, which they took some portion down in the Crimea area. So he gave it to that professor, gave that background in primarily in 2014, and the similarities between the invasion that just happened. But I felt we had to drop what we were doing and talk about Russia's war. So we publicized it by email since the preview was already, thank you. This preview was already going to press. Then March 13th, Jacob's bio, Jacob, that was in a natural. And I can always go overseas, it was.
Yeah, he went through a lot.
Yes, correct. So Reverend Ball had volunteered to dissect the Lord's Prayer and analyze it in various segments, and he did so. He did a very good job and very, very useful. Let's see. So it's fine. So
I just came across that.
so you, I was unprepared for it, but you volunteered to do a presentation based on a lot of work we've done at UCLA and a lot of involvement. And that was very,
Very interesting.
very, very helpful. So thank you.
You're welcome. So,
Where were we?
Jim, based on what you've said thus far, so the way you get speakers is things that you're interested in, that you're seeing videos on or you're reading, volunteers that pop up like
That's
that,
right, that's right.
and or some topic.
It's
just
staying current.
staying current, yeah. So there's no particular
It's,
depository of resources that
No.
you go to find that.
it is staying current, just being, asking what's going on religiously right now. You know, in many cases. In other cases, I called into
Yeah, I know at one time you used to go visit and interview people. You don't do that anymore, right?
COVID changed that.
Yeah.
But if I were still going forward, leading ADG, I would begin to do that again. I already have talked with American Saint, by Mary. He said, COVID's not over yet. We're still in quarantine or close to it, so.
Yeah, and I noticed you have Dr. Farmer down here as a possibility. Have you spoken to him recently, or is he?
Not for about half a year. I had more or less committed to having him speak up to 4 times a year.
Oh, good. So that's still a possibility
But-
that the committee. can
absolutely,
explore.
absolutely.
Yeah, okay.
But I had a problem. He is focused entirely upon, what's his term for it? Where is it? Restaurant farm.
You have maybe one topic every 4 months. That's all it says.
Yeah. What progressive
Christianity.
Christianity, that's not quite the right term. I don't know. So I could never figure it out. I always had trouble understanding what it was he was really talking about. You know, Cause I tend to get, I've listened to Ron Farmer for many years, going back.
Yeah, I enjoyed it when he was here.
Yeah, but I got less and less. And so partly it's, I didn't push on him. And I said, the other thing is that he's back in Missouri, 2 hours ahead of us. And his ministry, his church service starts at 10:30 his time, which is 8:30 our time.
Oh,
So we had to have him later in the day. And it kind of broke things up. So that was also a reason for, it wasn't fit, at least in the right time frame, in the right hour of the day. But I don't, just because I've not gotten much out of Ron Farmer that was new and understandable. Don't do your own. If you want to have him, I can arrange it, but understand that it's like, unless things change, it's likely not be at 8:30 our time. Because it is being administered as church.
right.
So, all right, we'll meet him up. So slang, we have, thank you. Then modern art. So you know the story there is very visible, and Dale Townsend put that together. And it was done, that session was done together, co-sponsored by the Cultural Arts Board, our Cultural Arts Board. So a lot of good art, a lot of, so variety, we had a lot of variety. So Moss was a book about this person's Jewish parents and the difficulty they had after the problems they had, or they lived in Europe, I believe, right after World War II, and maybe during World War II. But it was done not in printed form, but in comic script form. So it was unusual from that standpoint. But the message also was very, very dealing with a family, a Jewish family that lived through World War II, I think in Europe.
In concentration camps.
Yes. All right, so just a different approach. Comic book depiction. But it wasn't comical, it was not comical at all, the theme was not comical. All right, moving on. So Easter, sunrise service obviously conflicts with ADG every year. So that's guaranteed one Sunday that ADG will not be in session on Easter Sunday. Matthew had volunteered for some time to do a bit on Gospels that did not make the cut, did not make it into the Bible. And he did so. Now, Bishop John Shelby Spong, one of his, he's got a number of recordings, which I think you want to tap into. I expect, but one of them was atonement theology, where it said that Jesus died for you, for our sins, and he maintained that with a horrible strategy that puts a guilt trip. He just thought it was a bad version of Christianity, and he thought that those churches that were pushing that and making us feel guilty, and therefore we ought to revere Jesus because he died for us. And he gave the argument against that.
We also need to hear the second part of the fourth gospel one. That you had the first part of that, which we all said, what comes next? So.
Yes. I've got to go back and refresh myself on that.
That was one that we had
No, I know.
just about a month ago.
Yes, I know. Just a comment about that. In his early years of ministry, Spong thought very poorly of the Gospel of John. But then he began to realize, in his view, it was much more Jewish. He did a lot of reading of the Old Testament, a lot of research. He was very heavy into research, and included that actually John was more Jewish than the other three, certainly, like you pointed out. And at the end of his life, he thought more highly of John than the other three, by far. And he did a complete turnaround based on research. Okay, the Pilgrims of Connecticut, landing 15 years after the Mayflower landed, and being 100 miles or so west of Plymouth, where it all started. So I had the good fortune that my son lived in the town where Connecticut really started, which was Saybrook, now called Old Saybrook. And it was named for two members of the House of Lords, Lord Say and Lord Brooke, who in the 1600s, when things started to come west across the Atlantic, the House of Lords was more important than the House of Commons, and a Lord, person a Lord who was a Lord, would have very good luck in asking for a land grant by the King of England in the new colonies, or whatever you want to call it. And so Lord Say and Lord Brooke each got a land grant, and they intended to come to America, and they knew a lot of English pilgrims, I'll call them, who were having problems with the wars going on in England at that time over religion, Henry VIII was like maybe a century earlier, and Elizabeth and all that, and there was still conflict between the various versions of Christianity. And so some of the program just said, we've had enough, we're going elsewhere and raise our children as we want to. And so they came across the Atlantic and were the initial settlers. Anyway, there's a lot of history there at a time when England was turbulent, really turbulent. When I was visiting my son, which a number of times, I would go to the library, the library of Saybrook, or Old Saybrook, and read up a lot of history about that, the first generation after landing in America and going to Saybrook. So that was original content. I enjoyed it very much, but it was, again, due to my son's fortunate location in Saybrook. Moving on. So it means just say, that's not something that anybody else can do. It's just my good fortune. Moving on. The meaning of human existence. E.O. Wilson, I had earlier done a bit where E.O. Wilson talked about his specialty, which was ants. A-N-T-S. And ant wars. Ants going after, and ants turning big leaves that were much more massive than they were. I don't know how they got the strength to do that, but they did. Leaf cutters. Anyway, Wilson who died last year, was a great authority on insects. So that was a different kind of education. I think our congregation enjoyed, our people, ADG people enjoyed it, but they got something very different than they were used to. And then he made a lot of comparisons between ant culture and human culture, and the way we do war, the way they do war, and that kind of, all that kind of thing. It was really quite interesting. And that was on video. So it's still available when it's deeper. But he then, near the end of his life, he did a presentation on the meaning of human existence, and kind of summarizing up and bringing some philosophy into it as opposed to science. And I think it went over well. Then through John Fitzgerald, John had told me that he had these friends who were women who were financial advisors who could talk to us about financial advice, primarily for women. Men were urged to come too, but they weren't given the microphone as often. And I think that worked quite well. But I told John, we really need a presentation, which did not happen on his watch, on how to maximize the inheritance that we pass on to our children without rip-offs, without going thinking this. And he agreed to do that, but then he left. And that is still planned. And for early fall, that these women, as typically financial advisors, with the help of an attorney, talk about things we can do to make sure more of the money we want to pass on to our children actually gets to our children without being taken by the government and anybody else. So that is on the list of things I recommend.
You'll need to coordinate the dates with us.
Well, I will have to be the contact because they know nobody else. John Bishop would have been the contact, but in his absence, they know me, they don't know anybody else here. So I will be the contact for them. So, all right, moving on. Uniqueness of the Gospel of John. That was Bishop Spong on video, talking about why he's so highly of John. Then Berklow came and talked about nurturing natural spirituality. Again, Rich Sunday set that up. And he did all the presentations by Jim Berklow are arranged through Rich, and I'm sure that will continue.
So virtual,
Without- What's that?
is gonna be virtual. Virtual?
I assume so.
I
think
think
there's an
it'll be in
overlap.
person. I'm sorry, I know, you're right, it will be from his home in, yes, I'm sure it will be. And so it'll be virtual, correct. Then Frank, I think, no, has a friend, Rick Bell, who's a professor back on the East Coast.
It's Rich
Rich,
Levine.
no,
Rich Levine is Rick Bell's friend.
okay, that's correct, I'm sorry, I misspoke. Yes, and basically, what the reverse underground railroad was all about, and it was in the 1820s. Was about black slaves who would escape and become free. And then some northern whites who were trying to make some money would go down to the south and try to capture these and re-enslave them, and did. So it's about the re-enslavement of slaves who escaped. And it's a very, very interesting story. And then we come to current times where we're had a planning meeting last Sunday and talking about search strategies, et cetera, going forward today. Now,
Can I say something about Rick Bell?
yes, by all means.
Because it also is kind of works into what you're saying is, I don't really know him as a friend. Rosie took him he was a professor in an online class done by UCLA. And I kind of listened to it and I thought, gee, that was really kind of interesting. I just emailed him out of the blue and said, I'm in a book club. Would you mind waiting? If we read your book, would you meet with us? And he did. And then I said, would you ever come to a church? He said, oh yeah, I do it all the time. So it was just kind of by accident that this all happened. And I think that's kind of what happens a lot of times when we get speakers.
Oh, Rich, fine. And I think the fact that it's one professor talking to another professor, I think that helps as well.
I don't think that made a difference.
Okay. I'll take your word for it. Okay, so we're going down to the section dealing with upcoming things that either are upcoming or they may be interested in pursuing, et cetera. So the 6 entries, 5 or 6 that are bold. First of all, Rick had agreed to do a presentation on visiting Peru, and he also agreed to do a presentation on
Panama Canal.
yes. And he'll do it as an engineer, talking about how does the thing work? How does it allow boats on one side on the Atlantic to get over to the Pacific, vice versa? And he'll explain it, because it's very interesting how it works. It helps if there is a lake nearby, at about 1,000 feet elevation. That plays a large part. And there's plenty of rain in it, so that lake is going to continue to exist. So Rick has signed up for those 2, whenever you choose to fit them in. Obviously, on or about, soon after Mike Spitter comes. Spitter.
Without the S.
Oh, okay, well, sorry. So he will, at your choosing, at his choosing, make a presentation to, I'm sure be well attended. Who is this person? What's he all about? I've already talked about maximizing children's inheritance. Panama Canal we're talking about. Now, the James Webb Space Telescope, when that actually gets online and working, it's been in orbit or near orbit for a few months now, but they're still working on, because it's a highly sophisticated instrument. And it's going to take photos that have never been taken before of deep space. And so Ray Russell has agreed to, and Ray is the right person for this topic. And that's what he does for a living. You look at space, the night sky. So he will be talking, and that should be high priority. And I'm sure they'll have a good turnout if we both sides are right. So moving on past the bowl. So I talked to Bruce Cook about doing an update on giving us an update. Where are we now on the man's upgrade? And he said the time is not right. We're having problems getting the city approvals and whatever. The city's moving very slowly and all that. He's been very frustrated. But he's agreed to give us an update on the man's, which I assume by fall will be appropriate. Anyway, if you choose to do that, which I assume we'll have demand for. Now, next item. Around 1942 or so, all this area, including the church property here, was part of Japanese vegetable farms. And their property was taken away as the Japanese Americans were sent to internment camps. That's what happened. Didn't happen to German Americans, it happened to Japanese Americans. So go figure. Anyways, that is a presentation that again, in Maricosta School, as well as Manhattan, everything, I think everything's down to 2nd Street, going down to Artesia, on what East was supposed to. I think that one was blocked. There's close to that side, it's not that. So, and there are still resource people, I think, Nancy Esterberg, I think Nancy can tell you, but there are people here in our church who know about that family, the relative, the offspring of that family. So that's a history that we probably get a good turnout for that presentation. So let's see. Well, social justice, probably a continuation of Myra. Where's Frank?
You probably went to choir questions. Yeah, choir.
Okay, yeah. So that's something that you could do if you choose to do. I talked to Miriam Sane a couple of weeks ago to find out if we could begin to have the same relationship we had him as a speaker and have others who might have left. He said not yet. But in the course of it, he kind of volunteered to come and talk about campus life in the COVID area. And so that may be something you want to do. Jim Burko will be coming back, I'm sure, from time to time with the help of Rich. Bill Noonan is always a source of topics that we can motivate him. So he's in the corner, I guess. So more Bishop Spawn videos are available. The Central Valley of California, San Joaquin Valley, where I grew up, has been sinking for some time. That's because of agriculture, the overuse of underground water. And so the water table is dropping with it, the earth is collapsing. And things that were 100 feet above sea level are now 90 feet above sea level. So that's a topic that we could talk about if the of interest. And I assume that Phil Morrison, who grew up in south of Fresno.
He can talk to you about the Alta Water District, that kind of
Yes,
stuff.
yes. And it's just been volunteered by his wife. All right, if you want that. Scientific American last year had a lengthy article about how kids are being targeted with disinformation. Probably to sell products. They're being taking that information for the wrong reason. And it's affecting them.
So
So,
being targeted for anti-Semitism
yes,
and recruited for Proud Boys and those kinds of boys.
well, that's probably. the
Junior high level at this point.
Yes. We have not heard anything about Zimbabwe. I suspect the plans have changed, but they're not. I expect they're not going back quickly. That's my guess. The Tanda, and her husband would be the speakers. And they
You haven't
are,
seen their baby, it's she's adorable.
She
Just saw her last
she was
week.
in church last.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Sorry.
okay. Well, anyway,
Distraction.
I guess maybe the baby has changed their lifestyle a little bit, and maybe they're not going back quickly. So, I don't know their status.
They're very
Good. I have been focused on learning more about Monday and Thursday. My rationale, I believe it's a very important, this is a personal feeling. Not that I should pass that on to you, but it is the last time. This is when Jesus washes the feet and has his final supper with his flock, with his disciples. And it's the last time Jesus controlled his life. And for me, that is important. The last time he could call shots and do what he thought was most important to do. And thereafter, the Romans called the shots, the Roman and their Jewish friends. So I push for that, and Matthew committed to do it. But then Matthew's no longer here, so that may be something you want to do, or maybe you don't want to do. But to me, Monday, to me personally, Monday, Thursday is the most important religious day of the year, not Easter. At Easter, Jesus is not in control, he's dead. And it's what he did in his life, especially it was ending. How he chose to use his final hours that he was in control of. We did a presentation maybe 5 years ago or more about excavation, about a religious site coming out of prehistory, almost in Turkey. When hunter-gatherers were becoming settled and staying in one place. And so towns were building up, beginning to build up, etc. So it was a very, very early time. And Göbekli Tepe is thought to be one of the very first religious structures. A very, very small building, very small and very primitive. But I felt that was a very important thing to discuss, which we did again 5 or more years ago. And that's high on my list. It's something we want to redo. I would recommend we redo, but it may not be important to you. So, and I think there was an article in Scientific American about it. John Dominic Crossan has a recorded presentation about that compares Eastern Orthodox with Western Christianity, the teachings thereof. And that might be of interest. some schools, colleges, including Fuller, teach a topic called the cognitive science of religion, dealing with issues like, is the human mind preordained to religious thought? If we didn't have the kind of education we have, with going to church as a child, etc., would we still be inclined to think religiously that God allowed such and such to happen? There was a wonderful event a week ago. Was that God acting, or was that just what role did God play in the thinking of early humans? So it gets down to the real essence of it. Again, it's called the cognitive science of religion. And at Fuller is one of the places, Fuller Seminary. Fuller is one of the locations where this is a course that's taught. It was something that I was very personally interested in. You may not be. Moving on, Bishop Spong, there are a variety of videos and that I have access to, or I can put you in contact with them. Next, there's always Gary Hartzell. Gary has gone through some medical problems, including heart surgery, big time heart surgery. But that was several months ago. He seems to be recovering fine. So always with Gary, he will get into a topic and really do a lot of research. But if you suggest a topic, he will reject it. But he's got to think of it himself. It's got to self-motivate. So, maybe something there. Gary Hartzell, if you get him to make a presentation, it'd be great. But maybe before we get him to make a presentation. So, now, when it becomes election time, and you've got umpteen ballot propositions, it's good, I think, to actually legal women voters come in and explain proposition X and Y and Z. And they do a good job. I'd rather have them do it than me do it.
I've already reached out to them.
Okay, good. Good. Okay. But you may want them to come talk about something other than propositions, but propositions are easy to sell, easy to encourage our people to do it. So now there's a variety of resources here. People I mentioned, Alan Munson can be very. I have never used Jerry Dutcher, but he's a smart guy and he knows more than using. So I don't know. And Diane Carter has talked on a number of social justice issues or issues dealing with the birds that get in oil slicks, which she's big on, etc. So there are resources there that may be used. Next, we've never had a presentation that I'm aware of about the choir. And Pat Edwards probably would not really do it, but someone else from the choir may. The choir used to take trips to Europe. I don't know why they stopped.
COVID.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, nobody wanted to plan it and everyone was getting older and nobody wanted to
So
go.
I understand the older guy is quite honest. And the been there, done that. Is obviously so.
The last trip that was proposed, they thought it was too expensive and nobody wanted to go.
Yeah, okay. Okay, well, at any rate, maybe there's something about the choir, maybe those times have passed, I don't know. Marilyn Anderson reads a lot of books, a lot of very good books, and she reads them deeply, etc. And by the way, Carol Curry has a book club within the church here. So either one might have something to talk about. A great book that we ought to know about, that she explains to us, perhaps. Gene Wickham gave a superb presentation at ADG. many years ago about explaining death to children, which she had done back before they moved out West Coast there on the in New England area. And she played that role in her church. She's not, I think she's not an ordained minister, but she is close to it. Anyway, I would recommend, I think if you got her to come back and talk again about how to explain death to children, I think you'd find it very, and probably so long ago she talked about it, most of you have not heard it. But anyway, Ron Farmer has offered to make a presentation every something like every 4 months or so. And because of the time difference, we did it once, and the time we actually had it around 2 p.m. I think, which would be 4 o'clock his time. And it's a personal thing, I get less and less out of his presentations, just because I've heard them before. But don't listen to me. do I mean, if you like one farmer, I can help set it up. I'll give you his phone number in Missouri and all that, and probably his email too. So, but our relationship, he might be a little bit upset with me because I have not contacted him. So I want to be part of the conversation and apologize at the very beginning because I'm in the right way. So I've talked to Rick and others about the forest fires we have up north and how devastating in Northern California, how devastating it is. What just a serious loss it is. And he offered to give a presentation about it. So I take him on it. Racism and white privilege, that's something Rosie, among others, among many others, we talked about. The impact of microloans upon the developing world. That also, the Hindu, what's the person's name who is big on microloans, has got an organization that deals with it. Anyway, there is good information if we want to use it. Microloans are a very effective way of helping the third world. These are loans that are taken out by women, typically very small, like $200, $300, small by our standards. And the payback rate is like 90+%. People don't watch on their commitments. And they really allow women to set up small businesses, etc. So it's a good way to help poor people become middle class. There's a good story there. The economic competition between America and China is obviously an ongoing topic, and people like Alden Munson can do that kind of thing. Then I had a catch-all about interesting animals. Beavers, octopi, ravens, who are a lot smarter than crows, by the way, and hummingbirds, butterflies, what have you. And Rick Heckner will do things like that, among others. So about a year ago, police reform, after the police were Rodney King, no, not Rodney King, but
George Floyd.
George Floyd.
George Floyd.
Yes, correct. A lot of talk about how our police were not being educated properly, trained properly. And so that may be a topic that you want to deal with. And there are people that are knowledgeable there. I thought and began to make overtures to get our Manhattan Beach's director of police to speak to us. I found that I did not pursue very far because I concluded that he wasn't necessarily a very good speaker, maybe not very. I was told to go through channels, go through a secretary, and that's a good way to say no. Or your secretary can
I don't wanna talk.
And in the meantime, he's hired, but he's still on the job. But our Manatee police chief retired about half a year ago, he's still on the job. And so maybe that's something you want to pursue, maybe in cities other than Manhattan Beach, I don't know. But that's a possibility, especially if it becomes an issue again with police doing the wrong thing because they're not trained well. All right.
Did you talk with Karen Hill?
No, I didn't intentionally.
She's quite connected.
I know. Because your father was a policeman. No, I have not, but that may be.
Alan knows a retired Hermosa Beach policeman. He's a really good speaker, I think.
I would go that direction. I mean, some places are not good speakers. And people have the skill, they don't care to. So, moving on. Where were we here? Right here. So, we know American society is fracturing, and I believe a large part of it is the Fairness Doctrine, which was eliminated by Ronald Reagan in 1986. Before 80, up to that time, the various networks, NBC, ABC, etc., had to give both sides, or maybe three sides, of an issue. They had to fairly explain. They couldn't take one side and yes, good old Fox and push that one side and develop their own audience. And I personally believe that's a strong part of this unfracturing, the fracturing of America. Anyway, but that's a topic that you may want to get into. Linda Thorpe had a list of 4 items. I don't know what they were. So I would follow Linda and see what she's got. Someone else suggested poverty in Haiti. Haiti certainly is one of the poorest countries in the Americas. And Haiti was settled by slaves obviously from Africa.
Did you mean Donna Thorpe?
What's that?
Yeah.
Did you mean Donna Thorpe?
Well, Linda
Or Linda West?
Donna.
We said Linda Thorpe, but I don't know whether you mean Donna.
No, I meant Donna.
Donna.
Yeah, yes, correct. I'm sorry. John Donald Crossan has a video about Paul and Felicia. And the child, she was a young, very attractive woman in her 20s. Men were chasing after her, etc. And she found religion through Paul, and she became devoted. And it became kind of a tricky thing for John. How do I handle this very committed, but a very attractive woman who wants to be my disciple, etc. There's a very interesting story there that the video by John Donald can explain. Laurie Stoltz spent a decade or so nurturing the Tran family from Vietnam, I think Vietnam. So that's old history, but maybe you want to. Is Laurie still alive?
No.
And that kind of shows that. All right, my topic here is next is I would like to have something done about how skeptics or atheists, what kind of faith is appropriate to them? You know, the kind of skeptic that maybe has a scientific background and says, I'll believe it when I see it. You know, show me the proof of that stuff. Well, there is no proof to many things, and you either believe it or you don't. And so, anyway, that may be a topic that we have had in the church a significant amount of aerospace and scientific people. Maybe less now than before, but maybe that's something you want to do. And then finally, and it's something I've been pushing for, I'd like John Calhoun to talk to us, you know, and he was still, we had him maybe 5 years ago, and he knew everybody in our church still. And he was very alert and just very knowledgeable and reminded us of the history that we've always, I mean, his memory was very good. 5 years later, I don't know. But the other issue is it's a shame the person with all that knowledge and skill and all that is computer illiterate and cannot make use of a marvelous tool that would allow him to do a lot more research, but he's not. He can't and won't do emails. So the only way we can get him is to have Rick Hefner, who once in a while gets to Boeing in Seattle, to make a trip from Seattle to John's house and for him to set up the computer and all that and connect this at 8:30 on a Sunday to John Calhoun.
Okay.
And so Rick wants this to happen as that is I do. But Boeing has not used the services lately. So as soon as Rick has an occasion to go to more consulting or training at Boeing, that is some possibility, unless John is not good help. So that's something I push for very hard.
Thank you.
Couldn't make it. Yeah. These are ideas. You may want to do things a very different way. So
Do we,
Good job, good job.
is there an outreach for Mike Czar to come back for part
Yeah.
2 of,
I'm trying to confirm a date. I'm
Okay.
trying to get him to
Yeah.
last 7 weeks. We'll see. If he's available.
I'd love to hear his take on.
again, the new team may do things a very different way.
Which is,
Or they may initially do things a very different way and then deplete those resources and then have to, then it'll get a little bit harder. Deplete the resources and have to find new resources.
One interesting comment too, just for some of the topics that if they're good for kind of like families and children and things, if we can give a heads up to somebody so that we can start the outreach to kind of broaden it, because there's a lot of these topics that are gonna be really relevant and interesting for, you know, for parent education and family education, or to get the local community involved somehow, or just a space for learning and discussion, because some of these speakers are really, you know, really interesting. They have something to say that's, yeah, that might be broader interest. So for sure, if there's some of these topics that are interesting, that would be kind of a place to go.
Those two, I just sent out the byline for Rick's Peru talk, and then I was gonna send it to Amy to try to get it posted through social media, whatever it is she does. But I don't know, I think there's a communications board, I don't know who's on it or who to send stuff to.
Well, Amy is a good person to, she can kind of funnel that to the right place, so
Okay.
for sure, but we just need like, to make sure that people remember to let people know so that they can kind of like,
Right.
a
So,
lot of times personal invitation, or just like letting key people know so that it's hard though to get people to come, but to offer it up is something nice, like just to let people give it a heads up.
let me jump in on that. So Amy is, first of all, it was a one-man show primarily, which has pluses and minuses. But I had no time left over to really focus on publicity, other than working with Nancy on the Senate. But I had previously been the chair of the communication board. And I knew the role that they could, and Amy had more of those skills than I had. That Amy was a good resource to tap into. But we're gray haired and she is not. She's not of that mentality. She is of the youngish to focus on social media for young people. And I could never get Amy to do much to publicize, and I could not spend the time working it. So, but then as I announced my departure from ADG, I suddenly became, more people appreciated what I was doing, and more people became positive, like, including Amy. Amy suddenly turned around and became much more willing to do some publicity. And I'm sure when Mike Spinners is here, that he will be a strong ally. I expect that to publicize. If ADG is an asset, are we exploiting an asset adequately? The answer has been no.
Yeah. Mike Spitter is very into community involvement.
Yes, but he'll be in the publicity as well. And so I think Mike will I expect him to be a strong ally.
Sure, great.
So the time is now 9:40, 9:41. So, any other questions? Is there anything else I can do in regard to strategy going forward for ADG?
Thank you for everything you are doing and have done. Thank you, Jim. Thank you so much for all these years.
I enjoyed it. I make the point that it gives me entree to go out and talk to professors at either Marymount, at other religious colleges. And I appreciate, I go in and say, I'm representing the church and we get various presentations. And I like to know, would you be willing to talk about your specialty, which is X, Y, Z? And always, when I go, this is me, when I go to see it, and I go to see them, I go face to face, people I don't know who are authorities on some religious topic or some topic with ADG. I go and meet face to face to show them that respect and then make them aware that we're not dummies. We're actually intelligent people, that our audience is also intelligent. And I get a chance to talk with them about a variety of topics that I want to. It reinforces it. It makes it easier for them to say, yes, this is really an audience that is aware and intelligent and asks good questions.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you very much.